I get it.
Attack the corruption enough to keep civilization trucking along,
Yeah.
but but I think if I fully destroy the corruption and the graft, they will kill me.
And we're back with a truly horrifying report that came across my desk. I honestly needed to take a couple days to skim through, fully digest, and think about how I could present this without causing any trauma to my lovely, kind-hearted viewers. And now here we are. This is a federal court complaint, which was filed back on March 5th, 2025, wherein Elon Musk has been named as a victim in childhood to a similar type of ritualistic sadism, and has been met with absolute silence from the media.
Well, without getting you killed.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
yeah.
like, basically, I'm like, listen,
I get it.
attack the corruption enough to keep civilization trucking along,
Yeah.
But I think if I fully destroy the corruption and the graft, they will kill me.
That's a fucked up thing to live with.
Yes. So I'm like, damn it.
Well, listen, I really hope they don't kill you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I strive to be alive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a real concern. I mean, there were two guys that before I supported Trump and everything. There were two guys that traveled to Austin to kill me.
I likely would not have even been made aware of it if it hadn't been for an ally from Ali Carter's group making a ton of noise to get my attention. So I thank you for that. Patreon had actually removed the links they shared multiple times, but luckily it had also come through in my email with a portion of their message, and although it even kind of seemed like spam to me in that moment, I thought there must be something important if they'd sent it several times with the tagline, "For the kids," with exclamation points. There are likely many similar filings, such as this, that never reach the airwaves. But as the floodgates are opening in this great awakening, more information is spreading like wildfire via word of mouth. I don't know if I have any viewers from Wyoming, anywhere near Casper, Wyoming, but this is about to be some literal nightmare fuel, and I recommend you brace yourselves for this. I suppose that goes for everyone, because even for me, this has been haunting me since I first started reading into this and cross-referencing the data. This filing is against 13 different defendants, including Casper, Wyoming Police Department, their educational system, local and state governments, and their respective businesses, as well as local physicians. It also includes Natrona County District Court, the county's churches and dioceses, and a certain faith-based temple that I don't know if I can even mention here directly, but you'll see as I start presenting this federal complaint document. I do have to very carefully censor myself and this document for this, because this is not for the faint of heart. And like I said, in presenting, I do not, under any circumstances, want to cause any trauma. And I'll admit, I am slightly traumatized from these most heinous of allegations that I've ever reported on here. Not necessarily the worst of the worst that I've ever heard, but as far as trespasses against children, most specifically this father and stepmother against their own child, who was entered as a confidential minor, there are no words. But we must become awakened to the extent of the evil sadism being committed against precious innocent souls. This also in some ways corroborates Ali Carter's testimony about what's going on right beneath our feet in many towns and locales that you would never suspect, like Riverside, California, as Ali has spoken at length about, and how she was treated within their child welfare system. Casper, Wyoming is another picture-perfect sleepy town, with disturbing and perverse alleged crimes being committed in a highly organized fashion, with its most upstanding and respectable citizens working in tandem for a greater evil. That speaks volumes for how and why millions of children go missing every year, vanishing without a trace, and how some of those children are put into alignment with this evil by those meant to protect them. Viewer discretion is very strongly advised, because once you go past this point, you cannot unsee and unhear what I'm about to share with you. This may shift your entire perspective of humankind, and the kind of barbaric savagery cold-blooded, heartless humans are capable of. Before we dive right into it, I will give you a bit of a backstory on this woman, Jessie, who is acting as an advocate and who provides her own expert witness testimony. As a child, she alleged both she and Elon Musk were victims of these particular sadistic groups of people. As a child, she rebelled and managed to break out of that system, and has dedicated her life to exposing and fighting back against the most sadistic and ritualistic crimes against children. The word on the street is that Elon gave permission to be named in this federal complaint as a victim, and that he's advocating for this case to be given special attention by the federal task forces appointed to deal with such cases. I can't confirm the validity of this assertion, or that Elon has any awareness of this federal complaint, or has made any suggestions or is giving any advice or advocacy to any of the parties herein. This is just a federal complaint, and none of the defendants mentioned should be presumed guilty until decided within the court of law. All of this in the beginning is mainly just presenting the defendants and the reasons why it was brought to a different jurisdiction and filed federally, basically stating that there was not going to be any justice served in Wyoming. Alright, now here we go. You've already had a glance at this first page, but we're going to run through all of this together. Number 1. The biggest issue in this case is that there are evil people, and what they are doing is evil. Elon Musk, see Exhibit 1. And children have no way to make it known or to receive due process. That Exhibit 1 is the clip I showed you earlier. Number 2. Jesse and Elon Musk were children raised in this evil system, which is a foreign government and a foreign military that kills people who share their secrets. Number 3. It's important to understand that in this system, one man and woman does not represent just an individual. Each member is part of a circle or group distinguished by quadrants as well as by regions, both defined internationally as well as in the United States. Members do not act alone. Each action one takes is recognized and represented by their circle groups regionally and quadrantly. Number 4. Confidential Minor and John and Jane Does, known and unknown, are living through the same evil system now, being transported in Casper, Wyoming, across state lines and internationally. Number 5. This case is about Confidential Minor, who bravely took a stand against that evil and courageously let his voice be heard. The price for telling has cost Confidential Minor more than the world can understand. Those who tell the secrets of the system are threatened with serious harm, consequences, and death. Elon Musk revealed to Joe Rogan during an interview that he, Musk, is not actually trying to completely destroy the enemy, because if he does, they will, in fact, kill him. Which, again, that's that clip we watched. Number 6. Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown, and our families are being denied our freedom and God-given rights to live, be free, and have property by Defendants 1 through 13. We have the right to speak. We have the right to tell of the crimes committed against us, and we have the right to give voice to the voiceless. The John and Jane Does, known and unknown, we witnessed, who cannot speak because they are bound by silence, underground, or dead. We personally experienced and witnessed John and Jane Does, known and unknown, forced upon, exploited, harmed, and sadistic ceremonies that sometimes ended in death. Harvested for and harvested. We lived it all, and we have the right to be a voice for the John and Jane Does, known and unknown. We have witnessed experiencing these crimes. Violation of the Constitution of Wyoming, Article 1, Section D, Due Process of Law, 34 U.S. Code, number 12495. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Number 7. Defendants 1 through 13 have infringed upon the constitutional rights of Confidential Minor, Jesse, our families, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown. Our constitutional rights in reporting and due process have been infringed upon and denied in the state of Wyoming, which is why we fled to the state of Florida to report and seek due process. Number 8. The right to report crimes is protected by the First Amendment and 34 U.S. Code number 12495. This includes the right to report crimes from one's home. However, in this case, you will see that Confidential Minors, Jesse's, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown, rights to report have been denied through the coercion and cooperation of members of a foreign government and foreign military. Number 9. Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does, both known and unknown, have been forced into a situation of both compelled speech as well as compelled silence in their reporting of crimes occurring in the Wyoming area by Defendants 1 through 13. Compelled speech refers to a situation where the government forces an individual or group to express a specific message or viewpoint against their will. essentially violating their rights to free speech by requiring them to say something they disagree with. This is generally considered unconstitutional under the First Amendment in the United States. Compelled silence refers to a situation where someone is forced to remain silent against their will, often through implicit or explicit threats, coercion, or power dynamics, essentially denying them the ability to express themselves freely. It is considered a violation of the rights to free speech and can occur in various contexts like abusive relationships, oppressive regimes, or even within certain social situations where speaking up might face significant negative consequences. Number 10. On February 21st, 2023, defendants received the first Congress petition of Jessie and did not contact her or let her speak. Number 11. On December 23rd, 2023, defendants received the second Congress petition of Jessie and were made aware of crimes being committed in Casper, Wyoming, and did not contact her to let her speak. Number 12. On December 20th, 2023, Governor Mark Gordon's office was contacted by Jessie's escrow agent, Randy Lynn Erickson, and alerted to elite ritual hunting parties happening in Yellowstone National Park and Casper. Governor Gordon's office did not contact Jessie to let her speak. Number 13. On December 22nd, 2023, Jessie contacted Julia Thompson at Governor Mike Gordon's office and wrote, "I heard from Randy Lynn Erickson that she called you to share about my petition to Congress about my personal experience and testimony regarding the transportation of children in the state of Wyoming and through the Casper, Natrona County schools and community. I want to make sure that Governor Gordon has my contact info. I would love to have his support in going forward with these matters of grievance." Governor Gordon did not contact Jessie to let her speak. Number 14. On December 9th, 2024, confidential minor reported to Jessie Leverage, meaning defendants 1 through 13, had threatened to take the lives of Kara Newmiller, Terry Minchow, and Jessie if confidential minor did not produce something in return. Confidential minor stated, "I need to talk to Trump. I need to tell him how bad our government is." This leverage was put on a time frame with Christmas ceremonies, meaning that if confidential minor did not get to talk personally to Donald J. Trump in person or by phone, that defendants 1 through 13 would kill us all. That is why confidential minor Jessie, Kara Newmiller, Terry Minchow fled from the Wyoming jurisdiction to the Tampa, Florida jurisdiction to report the criminal activity of the defendants. Number 15. On December 26th, 2024, confidential minor Jessie, Kara Newmiller, and Terry Minchow fled to the state of Florida to Sheriff Judd Grady, who served on both the Human Transporting Task Force under President Trump and publicly claims to provide relief in matters of transporting and convicting perpetrators. Every person may freely speak, write, and publish on all subjects, being responsible for abuse of that right. Constitution of Florida, Article 1, Section 9 and 16, 3BC. Number 18. Deputies at Sheriff Grady's office did not even give confidential minor or Jessie the opportunity to speak or report, even after both asserted themselves to the deputies and asked for the right to share information about criminal activity. The only person Deputy Nunez spoke to was Kara Newmiller. Both Wyoming and Florida constitutions consider it a civil duty to report crimes. Wyoming legislation, Title 97 of the Wyoming Constitution, every person may freely speak, write, and publish on all subjects, being responsible for abuse of the right. Number 19, Deputy Nunez and one other deputy spoke to Kara Newmiller outside the sheriff's building on the sidewalk. They gave Kara Newmiller incident number 2451870. Number 20, confidential minor Jessie and John and Jane Doe's, known and unknown, Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow, are being forced by defendants 1 through 13 and those acting in the color of law as government forces, the judicial system, lawyers, sheriff's office, Homeland Security, the educational system, and government agencies, to remain silent about crimes being committed against them, while at the same time being coerced into agreement with defendants 1 through 13 that this criminal case is a matter of custody and parental alienation. This is a violation of the constitutional and First Amendment rights of confidential minor Jessie, John and Jane Doe's, known and unknown, Kara Newmiller, and Terry Minchow. Number 21, the First Amendment protects confidential minors' voice and right to safely report crimes being committed against confidential minors' personhood, and the right to report crimes being witnessed to other children. The right is protected through due process clause in the Constitution through the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments. Number 22. Confidential minors and Jesse's rights to speak and have due process are protected under Title 97, Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Article Declaration of Rights, Article 1, Section 1, Power inherent in the people, which states, all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For advancement of these ends, they have at all times an inalienable and indefensible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. Article 1, Section 2, Equality of all. In their inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all members of the human race are equal. Number 23. Confidential minors and Jesse's rights to speak and due process are protected under Article 1, Section 3, Equal political rights. Since equality and the enjoyment of natural and civil rights are only made sure through political equality, the laws of the state affecting the political rights and privileges of its citizens shall be without distinction of race, color, gender, or any circumstances or condition whatsoever other than individual incompetency or unworthiness, duly ascertained by a court of competent jurisdiction. Number 24. In addition to the above initial violation of rights, when confidential minor Jesse, Karen Newmiller, and Terry Minshew attempted to assert their constitutional rights through seeking declaratory relief, injunctive relief, and filing of criminal charges, the defendants 1 through 13 acted unconstitutionally by refusing to even hear what the plaintiffs had to say, and by not doing their due diligence or taking a report and investigating properly, or referring to those who could act in accordance with due process. A violation of constitutional rights and 5th and 14th Amendment rights. Number 25. Beyond a violation of rights, this is a case arising out of transportation of confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown, for purposes of training, exploitation, and sadistic ceremony in the Casper, Wyoming area, through other states as well as internationally. Number 26. It includes discrimination against confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown. The Department of Education states that it has a duty to protect every student's right to learn in a safe environment, free from unlawful discrimination, and to prevent unjust deprivations of that right. Number 27. Confidential minor and Jesse have been discriminated against based on race, color, rational origin, gender, age, and physical health and fitness. In fact, worse. Confidential minor and Jesse have been deprived of their rights altogether in the state of Wyoming and other states. The Department of Education states, discrimination based on race, color, rational origin is prohibited by Title V of Civil Rights Act of 1964. This includes discrimination based on perceived shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, including membership in a religion that may be perceived to exhibit such characteristics. This section just kind of further explains how and what kind of rights were infringed upon. Number 29. This is a case that chronicles the transportation, child essay material, and crimes against humanity of confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does, known and unknown, that confidential minor has identified, and given locations of where minors are being auctioned, trained, and held in cages underground. Number 30. The adult defendants 1 through 13 are connected to the transportation, child essay, and crimes against humanity in the Casper, Wyoming area, and across multiple jurisdictions, both in other states and internationally, and are politically influenced, wealthy, and members of a foreign government and foreign military operating within the United States under the guise of their religion. They have infiltrated local churches, schools, and businesses wherein they use their power, wealth, influence, connections, reciprocity, nepotism, and resources to discriminate children in the community who are born into these secret societies. 31. Jesse has testified in affidavits that there are no words to even begin to describe the grotesque and horrific nature of the training, programs, and MKULTRA that hierarchy children who are born into the system endure and survive. Number 32. In the basics of its essence, a hierarchy child experiences, witnesses, and is exposed to forced trespasses for the purposes of magic, group activities with adults, other children, and animals, harm, filmed essay, dark web essay material, hidden marriages and vows, quotas of evil, blasphemies against God, sadistic ceremonies, ending of lives purposefully, as well as for harvesting and consumption. Number 33. There really are no words that are sufficient to describe what these children survive. This is part of their training, and according to the system, being raised up in the way that they should go, it's a living hell with no way out. The system has used its influence to make it so that the hierarchy children are not able to report the crimes being committed against them, nor the crimes that they witness. Not only do they have no safe way of reporting, but they face brutal retaliation for breaking the code of silence and their brotherhood vows against the circle groups they are part of within their regions and quadrants. These circle groups are made up of adults and children. Members of these secret societies can sit in as many circle groups as they desire, enabling members to be involved with members of the system across multiple jurisdictions. Children chosen as hierarchy are forced at a very young age through trauma to come into compliance with the vow of silence, meaning that they're forbidden to share about the things they see, hear, or experience that occur within their circle groups. They're also forced and harmed within those circle groups to take the vow of brotherhood. Members who take this vow will secretly call each other brothers or sisters. The vow of brotherhood is distinguished in two parts. First, it says that one is bound to love thy neighbor as thyself. This means one will go to all extents to meet a brother or sister's needs. This is not just physical. This can include finances, provision of jobs, power, influence, certain acts, or lust magic. The second part of the vow of brotherhood states that it's one's duty to cover up thy brother's sins to all extent of the means. This means that if a brother or sister's sin is caught, meaning their involvement in the brotherhood is found out, those they turn to are bound to safeguard the system and truths about the evil they engage in from being exposed to the general public. 35. The second set of children are those the system considers expendable, meaning they are chosen to be pure assets for the system. Those overseeing the quadrant and regional operations of the system are in charge of overseeing the system's expendable assets. These children will be sold for SA purposes. The age of the child does not matter. Their SA and transportation can begin at birth. When they are no longer able to be sold for SA purposes, they are auctioned for sadistic ceremony, purposeful death, and consumption. Their remains will be incinerated into diamonds. These diamonds can be kept as trophies and used for certain magic, or they can be put up for sale on the underground black markets. The ashes that are not turned into diamonds will be cursed by witches and warlocks and sold for further profit to food companies and pharmaceutical companies as filler in foods and medicines. Number 36. As a chaplain and mandated reporter, confidential minor reported involvement and training in these secret societies in the Casper, Wyoming areas, across multiple states and internationally, describing multiple U.S. military bases that confidential minor has been transported through. Number 37. Confidential minor is given detailed descriptions of what training for the secret society entails. These details are supported by information that Jesse has made public about the system. Number 38. What confidential minor details can only be described as a foreign government and a foreign military using their influence and power across vast jurisdictions to operate multiple perverse predatory enterprises under the guise of their faith as trustworthy and upstanding members of society. They prey upon American communities and children, holding them bondage to war crimes, while flaunting their good nature and right standing within the very communities they are preying upon as government, upstanding community members, community support services, and law enforcement. Number 39. The defendants have presented themselves as good, innocent people, and when confidential minor told their secrets, they worked together to cover the criminal activity they are engaged in and collaborated to cause confidential minor, Kara Newmiller, and Terry Minchow to look like they were slandering, defaming, and parent alienating. Jacob and Andrea Newmiller and their secret society groups threatened confidential minor's life and the lives of those who sought to lawfully assist confidential minor in reporting the criminal activity while seeking due process to stop the criminal activity from continuing or from occurring again to confidential minor and other children. Multiple times throughout the reporting process, confidential minor stated, "They know I'm talking. They're going to kill us all. Everyone." Number 41. Defendants 1 through 13 have attempted to coerce their victims, confidential minor, Kara Newmiller, and Terry Minchow, into keeping silence and into signing agreements through a lesser jurisdiction, through family court, to settle matter as an alienation of parental rights and custody issue, which would force Karen Neumiller to face consequences for her actions as a good mother protecting her child, while being court-ordered to put her confidential minor right back into the criminal situation, allowing defendants 1 through 13 to regain access to confidential minor. Number 42. In retaliation towards confidential minors reporting, the defendants are seeking a psych evaluation, wherein they want to get a licensed professional to diagnose confidential minor with a condition that requires psychiatric or sedative medications. Such a diagnosis would further taint confidential minor's testimony against them as fantastical, and as defamation, slander, and libel, forcing confidential minor to remain silent and remain in a position of forced compliance with the defendants 1 through 13 and their criminal activities. Number 43. Further violations and injury against the personhood of confidential minor would be committed if given a psychiatric label for a condition confidential minor does not have, all to cover up the fact that confidential minor has made every effort to tell and make the truth known. Confidential minor has made every effort to report and seek due process. In this section, it provides more info about the defendants, who they are in relation to confidential minor, and other details. Jacob and Andrea Neumiller being the father and stepmother, and the rest being law enforcement, social services, the district attorney, the pediatrician, the therapist, etc. You can pause to read more closely if you'd like, but as you can see, these are all parties who are either participating or complicit in covering up these alleged crimes. I did take a closer look at the home of Jacob and Andrea, and it's basically in the middle of absolute nowhere, outside of Casper, and a very no one can hear you scream type of location, which would make it a lot harder for there to be any neighbors or other kinds of witnesses to be aware of any potential abuse taking place. Very little traffic in general, let alone foot traffic. Not really anywhere for a small child to run, even if they wanted to. And these don't exactly seem like the kind of approachable neighbors as when the young son escaped in the Ruby Frankie and Jody Hildebrandt case. These are also unassumed roads. Not even the Google Maps guys want to go down there to enable walkability viewpoints, so I can't imagine a child being too keen on wandering too far on their own either. Next, we have the alleged facts regarding the denial of due process and cover-up of criminal activity and war crimes against confidential minor and other minors relating to their case that was filed on December 26, 2024, as well as the District Court of Wyoming docket filed on January 19, 2025. Item number 70. On December 9, 2024, confidential minor reported to Chaplain Jesse that confidential minor had been taken by Jacob and Andrea to certain types of auctions called the Prettiest Girl contests. Confidential minor was aware that their personhood was being sold for explicit purposes. Confidential minor reported being dressed up like a girl with makeup and forced to wear a dress. The minor reported having to walk a runway like a model in front of male and female adults. This minor was then bid on and stated, "The highest bidder won me for the night." Confidential minor reported that one adult man won the bid. The minor was then transported by Jacob and Andrea to a location at an abandoned hospital in Denver, Colorado, which was identified as being located at 1055 Claremont Street, Denver, Colorado. Confidential minor reported a sadistic ritual took place prior to being forced and trespassed upon in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591A, Item 1, and 1594A, which includes but is not limited to recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, maintaining, and soliciting commercial explicit acts with a minor child below the age of 18. The forced trespasses included confidential minor being forced to perform various acts on the adult male. Confidential minor was also forced to receive various acts. The confidential minor then identified sharp rocks that were inserted during this act. My best guess would be that they're referring to like crystals or like gemstone type rocks, if there was some kind of ceremony involved. How a small child could know that there was an abandoned hospital in Denver is beyond me. If he was just making it up, that would be a pretty fantastical story that they would go to such lengths to be lying about something like this. But it does seem pretty abandoned. There's some areas where obviously people have broken in the past. It seems pretty deserted. There are some cars in and around. I guess with some of the neighboring buildings are still in use. But under construction and then not. Obviously showing different time periods in between here. But my guess is that when this was going on, that more of this was empty too, and the construction probably hadn't yet begun on those other buildings. So whether it had just been in like the car park area or in some of these other more desolated, empty areas here that they gained access within the hospital, I don't know. I can't say for sure why an entire hospital would be abandoned in general. I don't know either. I don't think there's any shortage of people that need health care anywhere in the world. It's not something that the supply and demand ever really changes. And maybe since it's now more in use, because it does look like there's some more vehicles around here. And maybe it was just a part of the hospital that had been abandoned. But obviously he had described, and then they were able to identify which buildings that he would have been talking about, allegedly. Number 72. Confidential miner reported that both Jacob and Andrea Newmiller were present at the scene of a forced trespass, as they sat in chairs and watched this take place. When confidential miner began to fight back, he alleged that Andrea held a firearm. Yeah, I probably can't even read all of that, but confidential miner stated that, or alleged that Andrea threatened him to behave, and he alleged that Andrea filmed the forced trespass against him with her cell phone in her other hand, holding it horizontally. The miner alleged that Jacob and Andrea stated that this video would be sold online to multiple channels and would make money so that they could pay their bills, all in violation of that code, including but not limited to recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, maintaining, and soliciting a minor child below the age of 18. There's 73. On December 9th, 2024, after reporting crime to Jesse, confidential minor alleged incident to Dr. Lonnie Teague, and it was recorded in doctor's notes that the minor had alleged to the U.S. Federal Florida Tampa Division. Item 74. On December 9th, 2024, confidential minor alleged a second incident to Jesse that occurred during custody time with Jacob and Andrea in December of 2024. Confidential minor alleged being auctioned for the purposes of explicit acts during the next custody visit with Jacob and Andrea. Confidential minor alleged being taken to a local residence in the Casper, Wyoming area where he was auctioned, and the bid was won by 10 men who were identified as being around the age of 30. Minor alleged being taken to the Casper, Wyoming temple. Minor did not report whether it was the older temple in the area or the new one. Number 75. Confidential minor alleged being filmed by Andrea while being trespassed upon and forced to engage in activities with all 10 men. Minor alleged being forced to perform various acts on all 10 men, as well as having those acts done to him by all 10 men. Confidential minor reported that the men were dressed for a date in black slacks and black dress shirts with black ties that had a single red rose on the tie. As an expert witness, Jesse asserts that the ties and attire that the minor described are attire worn by Rosicrucians, which is one of the circle groups within the secret society groups. Number 76. On December 9th, 2024, after reporting crime to Chaplain Jesse, confidential minor alleged incident to Dr. Lonnie Teague, and it was recorded in doctor's notes that the minor had brought to the U.S. Federal Court of Florida Tampa Division. Item 77, confidential minor brought Dr. Teague notes from what was reported on December 9th, 2024 to Florida District Court, Tampa Division. Protection orders were requested. A claim was filed with evidence in case 824-CV2988-SDM-LSG by Kara Newmiller, Terry Minchow, and Chaplain Jesse. Number 78, after filing claim and doctor note evidence, Carrie Minchow and Chaplain Jesse went to the U.S. Marshals in the federal courthouse of Florida on location and attempted to file a report for relief for the other minor children in the area that confidential minor has identified and given locations of holding. This information includes item number 79, an abandoned underground military base in the Casper, Wyoming area that extends under the Casper, Wyoming area with loading docks and extensions that confidential minor states extend under Government Camp Bridge, under the North Platte River, and under Jacob and Andrea Newmiller's residence, located at 17011 Restoration Road, Casper, Wyoming. Number 80, confidential minor has stated that there are hidden additional basement rooms to the residence of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller through closets and hidden panels that slide in the basement walls and on the floor. Confidential minor has identified one of the rooms as like a cell. Confidential minor alleged this room as one of the locations where John Doe, known, who is of the same age to confidential minor, is being held. Number 81, confidential minor has claimed that defendants 1. ended the lives of the parents of John Doe. Confidential minor alleged that they went to their house in the middle of the night, brought John Doe's parents out into the yard, and made them lay facing down on the ground. Then confidential minor alleged having to remain standing still in a certain posture with John Doe while they watched defendants 1. take the lives of the parents of John Doe. Confidential minor reports that then John Doe had to live with his grandmother, who was 95 years old. Item 82, confidential minor reports that they called John Doe's 95-year-old grandmother Babuzia, which is Ukrainian for grandmother. Minor reports that John Doe's Babuzia was their Yahtzee defense teacher in the secret society. Number 83, confidential minor has also reported that the underground abandoned Yahtzee military base can be accessed through the basement of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller's residence. Confidential minor reports that John Doe has also been held in docking cells connected to the underground base. Confidential minor reports that there are 12 docking cells that sit in a square formation, with their identifying numbers being painted in black paint above each cell entrance. Minor alleges at times John Doe is held in docking cell 12. Item 85, confidential minor also reports there is an additional open area in hidden basement at Jacob and Andrew Newmiller's residence. Confidential minor reports there are extra freezers in this area, and that this is where defendants 1 through 13 keep certain types of meat that is stored in the freezers at Jacob and Andrea Newmiller's residence. Item 86, confidential minor has alleged additional cages where people, adults and children, are held at times at Jacob and Andrea Newmiller's residence. Confidential minor states that there are cages, not the dog cages, in the shop on the property and underground below it. The shop is an additional building above ground located on the property of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller. Confidential minor alleges that adults and children are held there before ceremonies or certain hunting parties. 87. Confidential minor has also alleged that Jacob Newmiller used a chainsaw to undo humans in his shop while they were still alive. Item 88. Confidential minor has reported cages under the Casper, Wyoming fairgrounds and identified that Jacob Newmiller has access as well as the keys to these cages underground through his work building located next to the Casper, Wyoming fairgrounds at Wyoming, Montana Water Science Center, 2020 Fairgrounds Road, Suite 102 in Casper, Wyoming. Item 89. Since age 5, confidential minor has alleged that vast criminal activity of these secret societies and circle groups that confidential minor has been forced to participate in. This testimony is escrowed in affidavits and in video testimony in the District of MN, Erickson versus Sawyer. Video testimony of confidential minor includes verbal testimony and does not include naked or graphic pictures or content. Testimony includes being transported from classic kindergarten through the Natrona County educational system for the purpose of transporting and sadistic ritual and training in these secret societies to various community residents and businesses, the National Guard and military bases, both in the United States as well as internationally. Item 90, confidential minor has claimed Dad and Ms. Marcy George make us, multiple John and Jane Does, get in the cars. We go to several locations named in affidavits and video testimony. This is the father, Jacob Newmiller's place of employment by the fairgrounds, as alleged in the documents here. Looks like it's kind of, in a industrial type area. Not too much going on around. Here we are able to get down in front and have a look. Yeah, it seems pretty secluded. Let's see if we can get a look around here. Beauty school, huh? Some storage facilities. Very well could be underground storage that's been repurposed. Guessing this is like the back end of the fairgrounds where the trailers and RVs and everything would get lined up. And I guess there's storage here for that. But definitely not much going on around again. Same as with their property. Pretty secluded, not really much foot traffic will be going by here. For whatever reason, it's not letting me go down these roads, but it's letting me go down this dirt road. It's kind of empty fields. Not really much to see. But definitely the kind of area where it doesn't seem like anybody would be asking too many questions. Not too many people around that would be reporting on anything if they saw anything strange. But I guess if you're able to go in through that one building and then into the underground level, there wouldn't be much room for people to be able to hear or know what was going on there. It's not going to let me go this way. Oh, there we go. No, it doesn't want to let me. Yeah, it won't let me go back down this back way, but let's see if it'll let me go. Yeah, down this side. Take a look from the back end. I guess that was it there. But definitely could be underground space under there. And again, like I said, not too much going on around. I don't know if it'll let me go down that way. No. And I guess there's that river once again. So if there's like an underground tunnel or sewage maintenance type area underneath, that could easily be connecting to the tunnels that confidential minor mentioned. That I think it's right here. No, not yet. Whereabouts were they? I know they were somewhere in here. No, maybe I passed it. But anyway, where the property, they claimed the property connected. Oh, here it is down here. Man, that's a long way to go. But I guess, yeah, it's possible that it's like a canal that might have a cement underground area and then could be connecting here. It's definitely possible. Item 91. This transportation of children is from the Trona County schools to other locations within the community and outside of the state of Wyoming, named in affidavits, where confidential minor claims, trespasses, and crimes against humanity, including infants being lined up and eliminated. Item 92. This exploitation, transportation, and crimes against humanity are a form of bondage. Confidential minors' claims warrant further investigation because they include the transportation and bondage of multiple children, estimated to be hundreds of thousands, across the state of Wyoming and into other states and jurisdictions by defendants 1 through 13, and confidential minors' classic kindergarten teacher, Ms. Marcy George. Minor alleges that some of the transportation of confidential minor and John and Jane Doe's has been from the school in Jacob Newmiller's truck, and at alternate times in multiple cars and other transportation means, such as trains. Confidential minor Jesse, Karen Newmiller, and Terry Minshew have experienced retaliation and threats in revenge of their reporting of criminal activity and war crimes against defendants 1 through 13, operating in the community through secret society groups. Item 94. On August 30th, 2023, Jake Newmiller, Andrea Newmiller, and their lawyer published a civil complaint to establish a court record that is made available for the public. The following statement about Karen Newmiller. Karen Newmiller has made numerous false claims, cases, and accusations against Jacob, my children, and myself, requiring us to obtain an attorney. My claim is for repayment of said attorney fees. The statement alleges Kara Newmiller and confidential minor are liars and alleges that confidential minor's claims are untrue and false. Claims are established in a lesser jurisdiction through a closed divorce case with the purpose of keeping things in the family courts, thus bypassing allegations of criminal activity, investigation, and due process. To put it simply, everyone involved in this cover-up have failed to even go look. Item 95. On July 31st, 2023, Judge Michael N. Passion published an order to establish a court record that is made available to the public that asserts Kara Newmiller's testimony is false, and to cast her in an unfavorable light by denying the renewal of her protection order against Jacob Newmiller. The judge denied Karen Newmiller's due process and reasonable claims and request for protection from Jake Newmiller. The judge has denied Karen Newmiller and confidential minors constitutional rights to live in peace and prosperity. With lack of proper investigation into allegations and cover-up of confidential minors' claims that are physical, explicit, emotional, and spiritual in nature, Karen Newmiller and confidential minor are victims of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller and the defendants 1 through 13, and have sought the District of Wyoming Court for protection orders on April 26, 2022, and July 31st, 2023, as well as the U.S. Federal Court of Florida Tampa Division for protection on December 26, 2024. Item 96. The crimes being committed against confidential minor and other minors in the Natrona County area include individuals and agencies that are employed by the local and state government of Wyoming, who also hold allegiance, vows, and oaths to a secretive foreign government and foreign military. This multifaceted corruption, upheld through reciprocity and nepotism, made it so confidential minor Jesse, Kara, and Terry cannot report crimes nor receive due process. Item 97. Seeking help, protection, and to report criminal activity occurring to confidential minor and other minors by defendants 1 through 13 in Natrona County. Confidential minor Karen Newmiller and Terry Minshew went to Sheriff Grady Judd's office in Polk County, Florida, for help because of Sheriff Grady's public claims to protect children in such matters, to convict perpetrators, and to provide relief for transported children. Item 98. Confidential minor has reported there are minor children in the Casper, Wyoming area, as well as other locations, who are being held in cages underground and in underground military bases, who need relief through rescue. Confidential minor has reported the names of John and Jane Doe's in Casper, Wyoming. Confidential minor reports a John and a Jane Doe are being held at the residence of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller. The Privileges and Immunities Clause of Article 5, Section 2 of the Constitution states that the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in several states. The clause protects fundamental rights of individual citizens and restrains state efforts to discriminate against out-of-state citizens. However, the Privileges and Immunities Clause extends not to all commercial activity, but only to fundamental rights, basic human rights. Item 99. Confidential minor has stated that Jane Doe has been living at residence of Jacob and Andrea Newmiller. Confidential minor claims Andrea Newmiller has attempted to coerce confidential minor to marry Jane Doe and to engage in explicit activity while being filmed. Item 100. Confidential minor has also claimed witnessing Jane Doe processing meat at Frank's Butcher Shop in Casper, Wyoming. The processing of meat was described as skinning, gutting, and removing organs, and then butchering the meat for sale in the butcher shop. Then when confidential minor was asked what the reaction of Jane Doe was to such things, confidential minor replied, "She acts like she enjoys it." Confidential minor also warned Terry Minchow in regard to Frank's Butcher Shop in Casper, Wyoming to never buy meat from there. Item 101. Karen Newmiller spoke to Deputy Nunez from Sheriff Grady's office and was given incident number 2451870. I would like to share the details surrounding this event because they play a role in the denial of confidential minor's right to report and due process. Confidential minor arrived at Sheriff Grady's office with Karen Newmiller and Terry Minchow. They waited while a deputy was called in. Deputy Nunez arrived. An attendant at the desk inside Sheriff Grady's office told Karen Newmiller to go outside to meet the deputy. Alright, this is the Frank's Butcher Shop and Liquor Store in Casper, and yeah, just in town. Seems like a normal little suburb area with a little strip with businesses. Seems to be a construction zone or just kind of empty lots around here. But let's take a look. That's a little disturbing. It's a different place, I guess, but in the John Bonet video, it's Gary Oliva talking about taco meat. He's not talking about animal meat. Go figure. I guess it's not a laughing matter, really, by any means, but I guess just the irony or the coincidence of that is a little funny to me. But anyways, this is Frank's Butcher Shop. It looks like this big red barn. Looks like it has some parking, and there is like a showroom, but I guess a lot of their business would be mainly through this drive-through here. They have a packaged liquor drive-up spot, and then this back area, which I guess they drive around, and you're able to
the piece has a moderate loudness. RMS.
So I guess you're able to just kind of drive up and pick up meat to go. Keep in mind that this is all allegedly, so I'm not trying to suggest there's anything weird about this location or any of the other locations we've been looking at here. But just to get more context, I suppose, better idea of what places are being referred to. Looks like they do have some either incoming or outgoing shipping. But if they're a butcher shop, I don't know what they would be having shipped in. I guess just other ingredients, because I guess there is like a little restaurant area with its limited seating from what I could tell from the reviews, but I think it's just a small little outfit. So who knows? Guess we'll just take a quick look around here. What's in and around here? Definitely kind of on the outskirts of town. A little out on its own. Looks like whatever this was, whatever business this was, doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it does. Oxford Day Spa. I don't know. Kind of hard to tell. But mostly commercial buildings. Some offices, maybe. Could be homes. I don't know. That's hard to tell. I think it's coming into the residential area over here. But then coming back this way, we've got Quiznos next door. And then again, just more residential areas. Still sort of commercial. Not much going on back here. But yeah, so there you have it. That's that butcher shop. Item 103. Deputy Nunez talked to Kara Newmiller outside of the building and explained that Sheriff Grady's office would not help and instructed Kara Newmiller that the situation was a custody issue and that she needed to go back to Wyoming jurisdiction to report or she would be arrested. Item 104. Before leaving, Confidential Minor and Jesse spoke up to deputies and asked them to share testimony, but deputies told Confidential Minor and Jesse they would not help. Deputies did not even give Confidential Minor or Jesse the opportunity to speak or make a report. 105. Following the direction of Sheriff Grady's deputies, Karen Newmiller, Terry Minshew, and Confidential Minor went back to Wyoming jurisdiction to file a report of crimes at the Department of Homeland Security. They spoke to John Estes, badge number S07022. Item 106. After being informed of corruption in Natrona County and that Confidential Minor did not have a safe way of reporting the crimes being committed in that area, Homeland Security sent Confidential Minor, Carrie Newmiller, and Terry Minshew back to Natrona County to the Sheriff's Office in law enforcement. Item 107. Confidential Minor, Carrie Newmiller, and Terry Minshew attempted to seek relief from Homeland Security and were only able to talk off the record to John Estes. Without further inquiry or investigating, John Estes said their claims sounded fantastical and told Kara Newmiller Homeland Security could not take over the investigation, that they were going to investigate in Matrones County and to trust the process. 108. Confidential Minor, Karen Newmiller, and Terry Minshew went to the Natrona County Sheriff's Office under the jurisdiction of Sheriff John Harlan. The Natrona County Sheriff's Office outsourced Karen Newmiller to a private third-party agency, Children's Advocacy Project, upon which Sheriff John Harlan sits on the board of directors with a judge and a lawyer. 109. At Children's Advocacy Project, Confidential Minor was isolated and interviewed by multiple individuals while being denied having a support person present. Individuals involved in the interview process of Confidential Minor were Deanna Reich, Cherry Frimmel, and Linda Lauderdale. Note that Lisa Lauderdale is named in affidavits escrowed as being one of the individuals covering up criminal activity occurring to Confidential Minor when explicit abuse of Confidential Minor was initially reported in Natrona County by Karen Newmiller. Item 110. Confidential Minor reported those who interview as members of Defendants 1 through 13 circle groups. Confidential Minor reported not being allowed to discuss Jacob Newmiller, nor being able to report the criminal activity occurring. Confidential Minor and Karen Newmiller were told the things being shared with Sheriff sounded like fantastical claims. Confidential Minor reported focus of conversation was mother Kara Newmiller. Terry Minshew reported that interviewers told Kara Newmiller that it was all fantastical and accused Kara of making Confidential Minor report false claims against Jacob Newmiller. 111. From Child Advocacy Project, Kara Newmiller was instructed to go to Child Protective Services at the State of Wyoming Department of Family Services. 112. Madison Nipper, the social worker. 113. At Child Protective Services, Kara Newmiller was accused of parental alienation and coerced into signing a document that claimed she would not alienate Defendant 1's parental rights of Confidential Minor. 114. On January 28, 2025, in retaliation of Confidential Minor's reporting of criminal activity, Jacob and Andrea Newmiller filed civil action claim number 109186 against Kara Newmiller and docket number 2020 CV 0109186. Further violations from initial attempts to report crimes by confidential minor and Kara Newmiller that fall under 115. Kara Newmiller followed proper procedures to report claims confidential minor made and evidence of harm by defendants. Defendants 1 through 13 are individuals confidential minor himself has attempted to report to, even though the claims were physical, explicit, emotional, and spiritual in nature, and included alleged exploitation and transportation of a minor through the community schools, churches, homes, businesses, and interstate travel. Defendant 13 closed the investigation and attempted to use the courts to silence and deny due process to those reporting the criminal activity. We request the defendants involved in the initial closed investigation be included for further investigation. Defendant 13 are accused of being involved in a cover-up of confidential minors, Jesse and other minors, harm. 116. In the fall of 2022, either September or October, the Assistant DA, Kevin Tahiri, told Kara Newmiller that if she had concerns about what confidential minor was reporting, she should share with confidential minor's play therapist, Cody Wallace, who then could in non-leading way explore it with confidential minor. Kevin Tahiri stated, referring to confidential minor, that he is only 5 and would not make a good witness because confidential minor does not know dates or times. When they asked who is doing this to confidential minor, he said everybody. But Kevin Tahiri did not want to ask who or really explore for discovery. Upon further listening, Kevin Tahiri would have learned of a vast network of individuals in the Casper, Wyoming area that confidential minor was identifying engaged in criminal activity, including child transportation. Kara Newmiller claims Cody Wallace did not see confidential minor often and canceled a lot. 117. When Kara Newmiller attempted to talk to sheriffs, DA office, and investigators, including Lisa Lauderdale and Sierra Duncan, during initial reporting attempts to make a report, they told Kara Newmiller, you and your mom, referring to Terry Minchow, cannot ask confidential minor who, what, where, when, why, because that would be leading confidential minor. Kara Newmiller made appointments to talk with the assistant DA and others to report harm, but even the play therapist, Cody Wallace, who she was instructed to bring concerns to, told her, you cannot ask confidential minor questions about harm, because that would be coaching confidential minor. 18. When confidential minor made the following statements of physical and explicit harm, Kara Newmiller took confidential minor into pediatrician. I ask that the following statements confidential minor has made prior to age 5 be submitted as evidence to the record. My part hurts. Dad and Andrea hit my parts. Dad and Andrea hit my parts with a stick. Dad hurts my parts. I'm so sick of Andrea touching my parts. She just won't leave it alone. They hurt my butt. They poke me with a stick in my butt. They poked me with a needle in my parts and butt. Confidential minor showed the needle injection marks, which were reported by Kara Newmiller. 119. Confidential minor claimed being taken to the Altitude Veterinary Clinic, where Andrea Newmiller works. Confidential minor claimed Dr. Schwann, the veterinarian, as the one who gave confidential minor the injections in confidential minor's parts for the purpose of being able to be erected longer and for explicit performance, as well as injections in the butt. Here is that Altitude Veterinary Clinic, which is pretty much like neighbors to that Frank's Butcher Shop and Liquor. Not too much going on here. It's like a little coffee shop, oil change shop, Ford dealership. Oh, here we go. It's just a wee thing. Interesting. But definitely anybody working at a veterinary clinic would have access to various narcotics and other substances not necessarily meant for humans, but depending, I guess they could be used, like with cat tranquilizers being ketamine. Not saying that that's anything that was used in this situation, but who knows what exactly they were allegedly injecting into this minor. I guess with what he was saying was being injected into his parts, I suppose it would be the same as what they would be injecting to encourage animals to breed together. I'm not sure if that's something they offer there or if that would be it. Who knows? I'm just speculating, obviously. Looked like it was going to let me go down the side there. There we go. Okay. So let's just see. It's again kind of more just commercial property around. Thanks for being in the way there, you freaking guy. Wonder if that was on purpose. Maybe not. I kind of a cynic that way, you know. They're trying to block our view on purpose. I don't know, maybe not. But yeah, just seems like another regular business in every other way. But again, not too much around it. And animals making noises would be a good cover, I suppose, as well. And I guess it would be after hours, but for animals that would be kept overnight for observation or, after surgery or whichever, recovery. So even for like this collision center, and that's a nice old car there, by the way. But anything around here, there's not much around here. But even if anyone did hear anything, any foot traffic, anything like that, just happening to pass by, it could easily, any noises, any screaming, anything like that could easily be dismissed as animal noises. Doesn't look like there's much going on here. It's like abandoned, so yeah. I mean, the location is fairly isolated, and as I mentioned, there is opportunities there. There is boarding, grooming, boarding, emergency, surgery, dentistry. So I suppose it has everything that they would need, depending what they were trying to do. But again, this is all allegedly, and not any confirmation that anybody's done anything wrong here. 120, confidential minor reports, Dad pokes me with his knife. Confidential minor indicated the sharp end of a knife. Confidential minor has shown Dr. Lonnie Teague spots on body where confidential minor claims Jacob Newmiller poked or cut with a knife. Confidential minor claims magic was used to remove evidence of harm, so confidential minor would have no proof and could not tell about the harm experienced. 121. Confidential minor began telling about harm at age 3. At that time, Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow report confidential minor kept holding his parts and saying it hurt. When Kara Newmiller confronted Jacob Newmiller about harm claims, he stated, "You don't see any bruises, there is no evidence." 122. At age 3 to 4, confidential minor claimed Andrea was smacking confidential minor upside the head, forcing him to eat soap, would yell and tell confidential minor to shut the F up, and she beat the crap out of him. Confidential minor said, "One time I had to go bathroom in Dad's room and I was scared and it was dark and Andrea yelled at me, so I peed my pants." Item 123. In January 2023, confidential minor claimed, "Dad is a doctor when he does harm to my butt." Confidential minor came home with 6 needle marks in the rear. 124. No reports from the doctor were made of any of these harm allegations that Kara Newmiller brought confidential minor in to have investigated. Item 125. Around age 4, fall of 2021, confidential minor started reporting that one of his legs hurt. Kara Newmiller thought it was growing pains, or that Jacob Newmiller had taken confidential minor on a very long walk to do bird hunting or just walking. Confidential minor kept reporting it and said, "Dad yanked on my legs and it hurt." Confidential minor showed how Jacob Newmiller had yanked on his leg. Kara Newmiller had x-rays done at the doctor's office and had them check the knee. Finally, they did an x-ray of the whole leg and found what they thought was a tumor, but it was wrong, and the doctor's office referred them to the Children's Hospital of Colorado Anschutz in Aurora, Colorado, to see Dr. Nathan Donaldson. Nathan Donaldson ordered an MRI and bone biopsy. He concluded that confidential minor had a vascular necrosis of the fibula bone. They're still in the process of treating that. When confidential minor was waking up from a bone biopsy procedure, he started sharing with Kara Newmiller and Terry Newmiller and nurses, "Daddy hurts me. He locks me in the chicken coop." The nurse on the unit did report it. Ancient social workers called Kara Newmiller and said that there was no physical evidence, so they really could not make a report. The vascular necrosis was sent to 3 different pathologists to try to figure out the cause. There are no concrete causes that they found. In research, Kara Newmiller found it can be caused by trauma. Confidential minor did tell the doctor on the first visit, "Daddy pulls on it," and showed the doctor how. At 126, confidential minor stated to Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow, "Daddy wants me to kill Mommy, but I don't want to do that." When asked how he would do that, confidential minor said, "Stab you in the heart with a knife." Confidential minor has reported that this is how they kill people in sadistic ceremonies. 127. Almost every time confidential minor came home from Jacob Newmiller's house, confidential minor would report being scared and feared that Jacob Newmiller would kill Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow. Confidential minor gets scared when Terry would pick him up from school and would fearfully tell her she is going to die. Item 128. Any current investigation of confidential minor's harm has been closed in Natrona County. Kara Newmiller was notified of case closure by attorney Matthew Walker. He called Kara Newmiller on the phone and said, "This is closed for this upcoming weekend or you're in contempt of court." He said Kara Newmiller had to drop confidential minor off by Friday night, August 19th, 2022, at Family Connections at 5 p.m. Pickup was to be at 5 p.m. Sunday from Andrea. The attorney recommended supervised visits at Family Connections. Supervised visits only occurred 3 times, and then the attorney said the case was closed, and due to that, confidential minor was allowed to go home with Jacob Newmiller. Kara Newmiller initially approved confidential minor's stay with Jacob Newmiller for a 2-day weekend. Instead, the attorney and Jacob Newmiller took confidential minor for a 10-day stay. They took him to Pinedale, Wyoming, camping, which is about 6 hours away. Confidential minor has made claims of physical and explicit harm on the property owned in Pinedale by Michael Newmiller. Confidential minor was nervous about going, but said, "I'll go. Maybe Dad will be nice this time." Item 129. There was a woman at the Family Connection place, and confidential minor told her that Jacob Newmiller sticks things inside confidential minor. Item 130. When confidential minor was picked up, he got in the car and was crying and said, "I will not lie. They poked me in the neck with a stick from the fire. They told me to say it was from sparks from the fire." At 131, confidential minor has fear and rational fear, where you can't calm or comfort confidential minor. He has nightmares and is terrified of the dark. He verbally and physically refuses to go to school or for visits with Jacob Newmiller. Confidential minor cries and screams and gets physically violent. He screams, "Please don't make me go. Dad hurts me. Save me." When confidential minor gets back from visits, he's angry and cries and says, "They hurt me. I'm scared. I can't talk about it. They'll know if I talk. They're recording us. They have cameras." Item 132. Evidence of confidential minor's audio reports were turned into Lisa Lauderdale. Copies were supplied to Matthew Walker and the assistant DA and Sarah Duncan. Copies were given to Jacob Newmiller. Confidential minor kept reporting, "Daddy is recording us." He also said that Jacob Newmiller had copies of the audio recordings, and that is why Jacob Newmiller was threatening harm to Kara Newmiller and Terry. Confidential minor has quit talking about any harm and crimes witnessed because of fear. Confidential minor has stated, "I don't want to get hurt for talking." There is concern also that Jacob is actively monitoring and recording Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow. No reports were made on any of these harm allegations that Kara Newmiller brought confidential minor to have investigated. Item 133. Confidential minor reported to Jessica McWilliams, who is the occupational therapist at Sensational Kids, harm of being poked with sticks and Jacob Newmiller yanking on the leg. When confidential minor reported harm, Jessica said, "Are you telling the truth?" Then she told Kara Newmiller, "Confidential minor kind of embellishes things. It's always about dad. Whatever is bad, it is always about dad." To my knowledge, Jessica has not reported these things. Item 134. Confidential minor reported that Kathleen Johnston, a teacher at Crest Hill Elementary, who's one of the perpetrators, confidential minor has identified by her house and her name. Confidential minor claims, "She hurts me." He identified that hurt as being to the butt and private parts. 135. Confidential minor has identified Crest Hill Elementary as being the location where Jacob Newmiller, Andrea Newmiller, and Marcy George transport confidential minor from classic kindergarten to other locations, some being out of state. When Marcy George leaves her classroom, it is with confidential minor and other children whom confidential minor has identified. Crest Hill Elementary provides a substitute or fill-in teacher for the children remaining in the class. Here we have the Crest Hill Elementary, which is in town, quite a ways from the father's home, but I'm guessing the mother and grandmother have a home in town here, not too far off from that Frank's Butcher, and it's, for whatever reason, didn't save my animal hospital search, the Altitude Animal Clinic search, but that would be just around here, and then there's that butcher shop, and here's the school. It's kind of an interesting location. It's again kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I guess it's sort of a country type town. But right next door they have like a rehab clinic. There's like a little shopping mall, some residential. There's a temple here. I don't think that's the type of temple they were talking about before. But just to be noting, just something to note. But anyways, let's have a closer look here. For the places we can drop in front of and see. What a view. But yeah, not too much going on around here. It's just a regular looking school, it seems like. But a lot of wide open space around. So I guess if they were doing something strange, there's not too many people too close by to make note of it. Seems like it's kind of like a highway here. Not like a major highway, but not really, even the sidewalk's a little far away from the property there. And let's see, I guess this is all part of the schoolyard back there, I would suppose. I don't know what this all is. It's a little weird to have at the back of a school. But it is what it is, but again, a lot more wide open area here. Let's see if we can drop down on the other side here. I guess that's a different property. It's not attached. But I guess it is just like a little elementary school, so not really too much to see. But it just gives you, like I said before, getting more context of some of these locations mentioned. Item 136. I request investigation and transparency. Let it be made known if Crest Hill Elementary pays these teachers out of federal funds, or if they're paid through a private third party. If paid through a private third, I request to know the name of that third party to be named as an additional defendant. Item 137. Confidential minor has claimed Andrea Newmiller's daughter Eden has a boyfriend named Michael, who is also one of confidential minor's perpetrators. We do not know Michael's last name, but it is my desire to add him to these investigations. I am requesting to know his full name. Item 138. Confidential minor has further reported that the physical, explicit, emotional, and spiritual harm occurs at the following locations. We get in Dad's truck, sometimes in cars, some are Subarus, and we go to Dad's house and other people's houses, the river, and to Grandpa's house, indicating the property of Michael Newmiller, to school. Confidential minor has identified Crest Hill Elementary and all other elementary schools in Natrona County, at military bases, at a community private home, listed in affidavits and including a private home. Confidential minor identifies as the Sadistic Church, located at 840 West 58th Street, Casper, Wyoming. In the auction homes he identified by giving Terry Minshew directions: 2462 Balbin Road, Casper, Wyoming, and 2712 Backbeb Road, Casper, Wyoming. At the hotel, when confidential minor went with Dad and Andrea to Colorado. Okay, so this is the one private home, the 840 West 58th Street. It's located on a corner lot. I guess this one here. Oh, that's weird. I guess they could see into their backyard there. They blocked it out. It definitely seems like a pretty normal suburb type home. Pretty average, normal, middle class type abode. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But I guess that's usually how they stay undercover, is by seeming as normal as possible. A lot of evil does hide under the guise of good, but also, of course, not necessarily suggesting that these people have done anything wrong. This is just, again, to give context to what's being claimed by confidential minor. This is the 2462 Balbin Road, which it's actually West Balbin Road. There is no just Balbin Road. It's another one that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere here. And in relation to Jacob and Andrea's home, it's quite a ways away. It's a little closer in town, but just up the road from that 840 West 58th and from the elementary school, so very short distance. If this is where they're taking them during school hours, it would make sense. I mean, not make sense, but it would be very possible. It's on a hill, so you can't really see too much. I don't think we can go up into the driveway, but we can come up pretty close. That's a little spooky right off the bat, but definitely something memorable. So if these children are trying to identify the place, gives them something to look for. So I guess, you're wanting to be showy, it kind of works against you. Private road, no trespassing. But, again, one of those locations that not many people around that would be able to hear or see what was going on. No foot traffic. Fairly ideal location, if you ask me. Another ideal location. Trying to see if you can see anything from another angle here, and it doesn't look like it. It's actually probably farther away from these other spots than you think, too. It looks closer on the map than it probably is, I guess I mean. And then all the way up on the hill, so... Interesting. Okay. Item 139. Confidential minor states, when referring to Jacob and Andrea Newmiller and individuals in the secret societies, they know I'm talking. They know I've told, and they are mad. They hurt me because I talked. They say I'm next. Threatening harm and to kill confidential minor Kara Newmiller and Terry Minchow because confidential minor has told of harm and criminal activity occurring to self and other children. Damages, item 140. As a direct result of the harm, plaintiff confidential minor Jesse and John and Jane Does have suffered and will continue to suffer great pain of mind and body, severe and permanent emotional distress, embarrassment, loss of self-esteem, humiliation and psychological injuries, confusion, depression, was prevented and will continue to be prevented from performing normal daily activities and obtaining the full enjoyment of life, has incurred and will continue to incur expenses for medical and psychological treatment, therapy and counseling. Item 141. As direct and proximate result of the harm and transportation of their minor child and others held captive by Defendants 1 through 13, confidential minor and John and Jane Does, who are held captive, are reasonably certain to suffer further loss of consortium, damages in the future as a direct and proximate result of the above described explicit harm and transportation of minors described herein. Court-appointed attorney for the minors. I'm requesting a court-appointed lawyer who understands child protection due to the nature of threats towards confidential minor and his mother Kara Newmiller by father Jacob Newmiller and stepmother Andrea Newmiller, as well as other minors the confidential minor has identified are being held captive in various locations. Count 1. Violation of right to speak and to report crimes being committed and denial of due process. Item 142. Plaintiffs incorporate all paragraphs of this complaint as if fully set forth under this count and further allege 143. Defendants 1 through 13 violated the rights of confidential minor Jesse, Karen Newmiller, and Terry Minchow to speak, to safely report crimes they suffered without fear of retaliation, harm, or death, and other criminal activity they witnessed, and to receive due process in such matters. Item 144. On December 9th, 2024, confidential minor reported threats of death due to confidential minor's breaking of silence to Jesse and Terry Minchow, which included a threat of death to Kara Newmiller by Defendants 1 through 13. Item 145. Confidential minor and Jesse were threatened with the death of everyone if confidential minor and Jesse kept talking, or if they pursued due process. Item 146. Confidential minor and Jesse were threatened with harm to their personhood, being forced to watch the death of others, criminal charges, imprisonment, and being deemed non-credible or mentally ill if they kept talking. Item 147. For telling the truth about crimes occurring to oneself and to John and Jane Does, confidential minor and Jesse would be forced to carry the blame for the death of many through targeted events against the populace. Item 148. Some of the defendants are licensed under the care of the state or have taken oaths of office, while also having blood vows, oaths, codes of silence, and codes of brotherhood. These members are in violation of conflicting duty to the people through their brotherhood and various secret society oaths and allegiances. Item 149. Further crimes were committed in regard to confidential minors and Jesse's due process, according to RS 1980, which include preventing officer from performing duties, obstructing justice, intimidating party, witness, or juror, and depraving persons of rights or privileges. Item 150. Suffered the damages described above from Defendants 1 through 13's violations of the Constitution and First Amendment rights, Due Process Clause, 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments, Title 97, Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Article Declaration of Rights, Section 1, Power inherent in the people. Article 1, Section 2, Equality of all. Article 1, Section 3, Equal political rights. Count 3, whoever having knowledge. Item 157, plaintiffs incorporate all paragraphs of this complaint as if fully set forth under this count and further allege. Item 158, defendants 1 through 13 were made aware that Confidential Minor and Jesse were victims and eyewitnesses of crimes against humanity, trespasses, harm, exploitation, transportation, sadistic ceremony, and the ending of lives, at times for some kind of harvesting or consumption. Item 159, defendants 1 through 13 were made aware of Confidential Minor's and Jesse's intent to report such crimes. Item 160, plaintiffs suffer the damages described above from defendant 1 through 13's direct violation of constitutional rights and 5th and 14th Amendment rights. Whoever having knowledge of the actual commission of a felony, cognizable by a court of the United States, conceals and does not as soon as possible make known the same to some judge or other person in civil or military authority under the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Item 161, plaintiffs are entitled to recover their damages and reasonable attorney fees from defendants 1 through 13 pursuant to 18 U.S.C. Number 1595. Count 4, transportation of a minor. Item 162, defendants 1 and various defendants from 2 to 13 named by Confidential Minor engaged in forced explicit acts, explicit material, group activities, and the like with Confidential Minor and John and Jane Does, who were below the age of 18 years of age. Item 163, defendants 1 threatened Karen Neumiller with specious legal actions, including defamation for Confidential Minor's admittedly true statements. Item 164, defendant 1 attempted to coerce Confidential Minor and Karen Neumiller into silence, which would allow defendants 1 to continue their criminal enterprise and avoid exposure of their criminal enterprise. Item 165, defendants 1's efforts to silence plaintiffs through attorneys was an overt obstruction of the enforcement of the federal transportation laws that defendants have violated, including but not limited to 18 U.S.C. 1591A, which in itself is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591D. Item 166, plaintiffs suffered the damages described above from defendant 1 through 13's direct violation of constitutional rights and 5th and 14th Amendment rights, 18 U.S.C. 1591A, Section 1 and 1594A, including but not limited to recruiting, enticing, harboring, transporting, providing, obtaining, maintaining, and soliciting commercial acts with a minor child below the age of 18 years of age, 18 U.S.C. 1581 in regard to peonage, obstructing enforcement, held, aggravated, forced harm, and attempting to kill, 18 U.S.C. 1582, including vessels for slave trade, including being transported, held, sold, and forced into explicit services, 18 U.S.C. 1584, 1589, 1590, including forced into involuntary servitude, transportation, with respect to peonage, slavery, and involuntary servitude. See reference for further code explanations on exploitation and transporting code violations. Item 167, plaintiffs are entitled to recover their damages and reasonable attorney fees from defendants 1 through 13 pursuant to 18 U.S.C. 1595. Count 5, discrimination for continuance of criminal activity. And 168, plaintiffs incorporate all paragraphs of this complaint as if fully set forth under this count and further allege. Item 169, due to perceived shared ancestry, ethnic characteristics, and membership in a religion, defendants 1 through 13 discriminated against Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does. Item 170, defendants 1 through 13's perception of Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does was used as access to transport and commit crimes against the plaintiffs. Item 171, defendants 1 through 13 perceived Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does to be of the same religion and system, and used this perception to force Confidential Minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does against their will to be a member and to participate in their religion/system as a member of the Brotherhood, a member of that secret society, these other groups, and were bound to keep the vow of silence and bound to keep the vow of brotherhood. Item 172, Perceiving plaintiffs as the same as them, defendants 1 through 13 relied on the participation of confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does to keep their secrets, which included being victims and witnesses of criminal activity and the cover-up of criminal activity. Item 173, defendants 1 through 13's religious system is highly and graphically explicit. Defendants 1 through 13 discriminated against the orientation of confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Does. Item 174, defendants 1 forced confidential minor against his will to dress up like a girl. This included being called by female names like Ashlyn Christine, wearing makeup, wearing girl dresses and shoes, and being forced to sleep in a bedroom that was predominantly pink with toys oriented towards being a girl. Item 175, Jessie was discriminated against by the system in the same way. She was forced at times to wear clothing attire common to Swiss male royalty, blue velvet top and trousers, and to pretend that she was her training partner's brother, and was called and forced to sign her name in certain chronicles and at times in training projects and programs as Sonny Kilrush Miseko. Item 176, defendants 1 through 13, working in conjunction with members of the Brotherhood and other secret societies and the school systems in the states of Wyoming, Wisconsin, Illinois, and West Virginia, forced confidential minor and Jesse against their will, both during and outside of school hours, to witness and be present at heinous and unspeakable crimes and acts. Item 177, this included forcing confidential minor and Jesse to learn explicit terms and watch explicit acts being committed against infants, toddlers, and children, which included same-gendered group activities, underage activities, and activities involving animals. Item 178, the explicit acts witnessed were in direct violation of confidential minors and Jesse's Judeo-Christian beliefs and desires. Item 179, confidential minor and Jesse were forced to watch the explicit crimes and were not allowed by defendants 1 through 13 to turn their faces away or to close their eyes. Any attempts of confidential minor or Jesse to thwart defendants 1 through 13 in their crimes were met with severe retaliation in the form of isolation, harm, fear of harm, threats of death to self or others. Item 180, not only were confidential minor and Jesse victims and witnesses of explicit crimes, but defendants 1 through 13 made confidential minor and Jesse, as minors, make hidden marriage contracts with John and Jane Does. Item 181, Andrea Newmiller attempted to force confidential minor at age 7 to make a marriage contract with a Jane Doe, aged 9. Andrea Newmiller attempted to cause confidential minor to engage in explicit acts with Jane Doe while filming for the purposes of selling and profiting. Item 182, Jesse was forced into marriage contracts by Yahtzee Michael Carcock, who held one of her marriage contracts in trust. Jesse was also forced to make hidden marriage vows with 2 John Does. Item 183. Further, in regard to discrimination, the Department of Education states that it has a duty to protect every student's right to learn in a safe environment, free from unlawful discrimination, and to prevent unjust deprivations of that right. Confidential minor and Jesse have been discriminated against based on race, color, rational origin, gender, age, and physical health and fitness. In fact, worse. Item 184. Confidential minor and Jesse have been deprived of their rights altogether in the states of Wyoming, Wisconsin, Illinois, and West Virginia. Not only was our rights as students to education deprived, but we were also forced to perform labor for the system. We had positions and duties, job performance ratings, and evaluations, and were forced to work in many unsafe situations, most of which cannot even be classified as XXX. Item 185, plaintiffs suffered the damages described above from defendants 1 through 13's direct violation of Title IV of Civil Rights Act of 1964. Item 186, plaintiffs are entitled to recover their damages, back pay for work done, and reasonable attorney fees from defendants 1 through 13 pursuant to 18 U.S.C. 1595, Count 5, obstruction. Item 187, plaintiffs incorporate all paragraphs of this complaint as if fully set forth under this count and further allege. Item 188, defendants 1 through 13 used compelled speech and compelled silence in an attempt to cover up their criminal activity. Item 189, further, defendants 1 used their attorneys and tried to cover up what the crimes they had committed against confidential minor and attempted to silence the plaintiffs through intimidation and threats of being in contempt of court so that defendants could continue their criminal enterprise. Item 190, Through attorneys, defendants 1 through 13 intimidated and threatened confidential minor and Karen Neumiller with spacious legal actions, including defamation, arrest, and contempt of court for admittedly true statements. Defendants 1 attempted to coerce confidential minor and Karen Neumiller into silence, which would allow defendants 1 to continue their criminal enterprise and avoid exposure of their criminal enterprise. Item 191. Defendants 1 efforts to silence plaintiffs through attorneys was an overt obstruction of the enforcement of the federal transportation laws that defendants 1 through 13 violated, including but not limited to 18 U.S.C. 1591A, which in itself is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591D. Item 192. On July 31st, 2023, Judge Michael N. Passion published an order to establish a court record that is made available to the public that asserts Karen Neumiller's testimony is false and to cast her in unfavorable light by denying the renewal of her protection order against Jacob Neumiller. The judge denied Karen Neumiller's due process and reasonable claims and request for protection from Jacob Neumiller. The judge has denied Karen Neumiller and confidential minors constitutional rights to live in peace and prosperity, with lack of proper investigation into allegations and cover-up of confidential minors' claims of harms that are physical, explicit, emotional, and spiritual in nature. Karen Neumiller and confidential minor are victims of Jacob and Andrea Neumiller and the defendants 1 through 13 and have sought the District of Wyoming Court for protection orders on April 26, 2022 and July 31st, 2023, as well as the U.S. Federal Court of Florida Tampa Division for protection on December 26, 2024. Item 193. Plaintiffs suffered the damages and attorney fees from defendants 1 through 13's obstruction, as described above. Item 194. Plaintiffs are entitled to recover their damages, back pay for work done, and reasonable attorney fees from defendants 1 through 13, pursuant to 18 U.S.C. 1595. Count 6, conspiracy. Item 195. Plaintiffs incorporate all paragraphs of this complaint as if fully set forth under this count and further allege. Item 196. Defendants 1 through 13 were in agreement and worked in cooperation to accomplish human transportation through unlawful means. Item 197. As a quadrant leader, Jacob Neumiller relied on the participation of defendants 1 through 13 as recruiters, transporters, and handlers, all adults whom confidential minor and John and Jane Doe's should have been able to trust to coerce and transport minors in the Casper, Wyoming area across state lines and internationally. Item 198. Defendant Andrea Neumiller used her position at Altitude Veterinary Clinic in agreement with Dr. Schwann, the veterinarian, to give confidential minor explicit shots in confidential minor's private parts and unknown shots in confidential minor's rear. Item 199. Defendants 1 through 13 agreed to a criminal transportation enterprise of minor children, including confidential minor and John and Jane Doe's. Item 200. Defendants 1 through 13 agreed to a criminal transportation enterprise of minor children, including confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Doe's, for the purpose of training, recruiting, and programming in their secret societies for the purpose of continuing the system and sadistic ceremonies. Item 201. Defendants 1 through 13 used coercion and threats to the physical, emotional, spiritual, and social well-being of confidential minor, Jesse, and John and Jane Doe's. Item 202. Every act of discrimination was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Item 203. Every act of explicit exploitation was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. 204. Every act of transportation was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Item 205. Every act of training, programming, child labor, and sadistic ceremony was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Item 206. Financial benefits, reciprocity, and nepotism conferred upon members of the conspiracy in return for their proffering of children for explicit exploitation, training, and programming are additional acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. Item 207. Defendants 1 through 13 agreed and conspired to maintain secrecy regarding the explicit exploitation of confidential minor and John and Jane Doe's. 208. Defendants 1 through 13 agreed and conspired to maintain secrecy regarding the transportation, training, programming, child labor, and sadistic ceremonies of confidential minor Jesse and John and Jane Doe's in order to protect themselves and others financially and politically. Item 209. The failure of any member of the conspiracy to report confidential minors, Jesse's, and John and Jane Doe's harm constitutes an ongoing act of the conspiracy on the part of the defendants 1 through 13 and other members of the conspiracy. Item 210, Defendants 1 through 13's participation in the conspiracy to transport confidential minor, Jesse and John and Jane Doe's, and Defendants 1 through 13's conspiracy to silence confidential minor, Jesse and John and Jane Doe's, and their families are in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591A and 1591D, among other federal statutes. Item 211, plaintiffs are entitled to bring civil and criminal claims for damages pursuant to 18 U.S.C. 1595. Item 212, plaintiffs are entitled to recover their damages, back pay for work done, and reasonable attorney fees from Defendants 1 through 13 directly from the conspiracy described above. Wherefore, plaintiffs demand judgment against defendants in an amount to be proven at trial, plus costs, disbursements, reasonable attorney fees, interest, and whatever other relief the court deems just and equitable. And here we are, the final page. Demand is hereby made for a trial by jury, respectfully submitted by Jesse, dated March 4th, 2025, in the state of Tennessee. Is that Knox County, I think? Subscribed as sworn to this 4th day of March 2025 by Jesse, both individually and as a chaplain for the confidential minors, known and unknown, identified herein. And it's been signed by both Jesse and a notary public. All right. So I did go ahead and do a little more digging about the feasibility of some of the claims stated in this case file. The one major one that it just keeps coming up, a lot of survivors that have come forward have mentioned and talked about tunnel systems being used in relation to certain crimes against humanity. We've spoken about it with Kathy O'Brien. Zara Marley has spoken about it. Ali Carter obviously has been speaking about it for a while. It's come up in other cases that didn't end up having justice served, like in the McMartin case, where the children had talked about these tunnel systems in secret rooms beneath the preschool, and an archaeological excavation had proven that there had been tunnels that matched the descriptions of what these kids had said, but for whatever reason, it wasn't made admissible in court, and ultimately their testimonies were deemed uncredible. So, of course, no justice was served, but it seems like this is a common thread, a common denominator of truth in a lot of these enterprises, including the Epstein, Diddy, all these different things. All these different cases have talked about tunnels at some point or another, and I think that we definitely need to explore that further, the feasibility of that overall. I mean, we do know that some wealthy individuals do have underground tunnel systems and bunkers and different things underneath their homes. That's no secret. We also know that during Prohibition era, different underground tunnel systems and just ways of smuggling and having different recreational areas beneath different businesses and in certain locations so that people could keep the party going when liquor was illegal. We know that those systems exist. We know that, there were bootleggers and moonshiners and all these things, historically speaking. And just because they stopped being used for the illegal transportation of liquor doesn't mean they're not still being used. And they've been brought up in certain cases to do with transportation of drugs over borders, over state lines, etc. So the fact that it's still so misunderstood or not believed that it could also be used to transport human beings, that these different tunnel systems could have been restored and expanded on, I think that that's something that's a big common denominator of truth that does need to be explored and discussed at further length. So anyways, I did look and I found this article regarding tunnel systems that start and stop under downtown Casper. This was posted in 2007 by a Star Tribune staff writer, so it's a pretty legitimate news source. So long after outliving its original purpose, an elaborate network of underground tunnels continued to exist for decades in Casper. In some places until just recently, the dark passageways ran beneath sidewalks, connecting the basements of downtown businesses, and sometimes crossing beneath streets. Kevin Anderson, a Western history archivist at Casper College, has been trying to find information on the steam tunnels for years, but answers continue to elude him. I can't find anything but rumors, he said. Sometimes it's me starting rumors, and then they come back to me. Many downtown merchants have heard stories of the tunnels, but few have ever been inside one or seen evidence that the tunnels existed. Some of the stories are urban legends with bits of truth, while others are just plain false. There are no known books or living experts with extensive information about the tunnel system, but after a search of more than a dozen basements located beneath downtown businesses, the Star Tribune has learned the following. About 100 years ago, a network of steam tunnels ran beneath Casper's downtown sidewalks and provided steam heat to downtown businesses from a power plant located at Collins Avenue and Center Street. The tunnels ran north along Center Street to the old courthouse and branched off down 1st and 2nd Streets, connecting the basement of many buildings. The Casper Electric Company's steam plant burned down in January 1917 and was later relocated to where the Nicolaitans Art Museum is now. Over the years, the tunnels were sealed off and filled in, but were probably used from 1920 to 1933 to smuggle liquor during Prohibition. Jason Gutierrez, associate engineer for the city of Casper, said that all the tunnels and basements located underneath the sidewalks along 2nd Street were filled in 2 summers ago, when 2nd Street was reconstructed from Park to David Streets. Gutierrez said he has heard a lot of rumors, but never saw any evidence of tunnels crossing 2nd Street. Okay, but we know tunnels existed, and some businesses maybe did choose to go ahead and fill them in, or due to reconstruction or, renovation, they were closed off and filled in. But for anyone that would want to continue using them for, illegal or explicit purposes, we know that they were there. So who's to say that they were all filled in and that they were all discontinued in use? So a CD passed. In 1918, Casper had grown to a population of more than 11,000. Many of its residents were men who worked hard in the oil field and played hard downtown. The west side of Center Street from Midwest to First had 9 saloons, as well as numerous pool halls, tobacco shops, and parlors, according to old fire maps. The east side had no saloons, but several banks, barber shops, and a shooting gallery. According to A.J. Mockler's History of Natrona County, women were not allowed to walk on the west side of Center Street for fear of harming their reputation. The storefront saloons closed during Prohibition, but illegal drinking and gambling continued in many downtown basements, as well as in Casper's old red light district by the river in the Sandbar area. What else is by the river? What did we see down by the river? While there's no documentation showing the abandoned steam tunnels were put to use moving alcohol and high-profile drinkers, many downtown business owners speculate that the secret staircases and trapdoors leading to their basements were likely used for such purposes. The basement of the Rialto Theater used to be a pool hall, according to Craig Hosey, co-owner of Movie Palace, and the room was often used for illegal gambling. Back then, this was a seedy place where lowlifes hung out, Hosey said. Hosey said the Rialto had its own boiler heater and probably didn't connect to the steam tunnels. The building's solid concrete foundation would seem to support his claims, but across the street in the basement of the former McCann's jewelry store, the original stone foundation reveals a sealed-off tunnel facing north to the Rialto that could suggest otherwise. In the basement of the Petroleum building, a sealed-off tunnel faces east to McCann's. Also in the basement of the Petroleum, an elaborate wooden doorway connects the basement to a stairway leading up to the alley. The stairs have long since been blocked from above, but the doorway remains, a secret passage to nowhere. Modern tunnels. Many downtown businesses share basement areas that were linked together by locked passageways. Over the years, owners would occasionally find their businesses broken into from below. Most owners decided to seal off those passageways permanently with bricks and keep their basements to themselves. Some of those passageways remain open, but building owners are reluctant to publicize any potential security gaps. I wonder why. I wonder what they'd be using them for. I wonder. Allegedly, who knows? I don't know. I'm not saying any of these businesses are part of any illegal enterprise or are guilty of anything, but this is just to show more context and the potential of these different tunnels existing. And it sounds like they did. They very much do. And so that does give some credibility to the confidential miners' claims. Casper has at least 2 tunnels that are still used by downtown banks to ferry money underground, but the presidents of those banks asked not to be identified for fear that crooks could be inspired to tunnel into their establishments. One tunnel crosses under First Street, a state highway. Even though the private tunnel has been in place for decades, the Wyoming Department of Transportation was unaware of its existence until informed by the Star Tribune recently. Interesting. I wonder why. I wonder why it would be kept a secret for so long. I wonder. Big basements. Many of the buildings on 2nd Street had large basements that expanded beneath sidewalks and into the street. Metal grates in the sidewalk allowed street access to some basements as recently as 2 years ago, according to Casper Fire EMS Chief Mark Young. Young did building inspections many years ago for the fire department and recalled going through metal doors into a passageway that ran beneath the sidewalk on 2nd Street. Young said the tunnel accessed another nearby building. 2 years ago, the city reconstructed 2nd Street and required all businesses to seal off any basements that went under the sidewalk. The city put in a gray brick retaining wall at the edge of the sidewalk, sometimes chopping off 8 feet of the basement storage. In several basements, the wall comes suddenly and abruptly. Stairs lead to the basement doors, but behind the doors, the wall. The city engineer's office said the basements were filled in for safety reasons, and so the city could install light poles and tree planters. On Center Street, several buildings still have basements that expand beneath the sidewalk. The Wonder Bar, which first opened under that name in the 40s, has a basement that goes under the sidewalk on Center Street. Owner Pat Sweeney said that the underground brewery system would be severely affected if the building lost that section of the basement. Next door, in the State Employment Security Building, at the corner of Center and Midwest, the building's basement expands completely under the sidewalk up to the street. In a storage room deep in the bowels of the building, a tree planter pokes down from the sidewalk in a sunken section of the ceiling. Digging through old photos and newspaper clippings at the Casper College Library, he has found that you can get more information than you realize is there when you start putting all the bits and pieces together. One of the things that fascinates me is that the trail of history is fragmentary, he said. By looking through many sources, you can start to correlate information and start to form a more accurate historical picture. History is not always written down in one place. So I went a step further, and there are some abandoned railway tunnels that are no longer in use, but they do extend between the Wind River Canyon in central Wyoming. You can see a series of railroad tunnels on the west side of the river, and that there's one tunnel to the south of the rest that stands out, off by itself with no tracks leading to it and evidence of a collapse just inside its opening. This now abandoned solitary tunnel is the only remaining evidence that the railroad tracks running through the Wind River Canyon once took a different route prior to the construction of the Boysen Dam. When they started construction on the current dam, it was going to raise the lake. John Bass, superintendent of Boysen State Park, told Cowboy State Daily. Boysen Reservoir was going to be covering the existing railroad tracks, so the railroad tracks had to be moved to higher elevations. The railroad line between Billings, Montana and Casper, Wyoming was built by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Company, opening the line between Thermopolis and Shoshone in 1914. The railroad tunnels on the west side of the river were actually constructed first, before the highway tunnels were there, said Bass. Because the railroad tracks were placed in relation to the river as it was running at the time, when planning was underway for the Boysen Dam in the 1940s, it became clear that the tracks would have to move. They just had to slowly start bringing up the elevation to get it high enough to get the railroad out of where the lake bed was going to be. So anyways, it's obviously there were other different tunnel systems that are now abandoned that could have been repurposed, running down and along the river, that North Platte River, running down across and through Casper, Wyoming. They said that to move the tracks, work that had to be done in the early 1900s to funnel the trains through the Owl Creek Mountains would have to be altered, including abandoning one of the tunnels. To make the route work, though, the railroad would have to build a tall trestle over a large ravine, just a few hundred feet from the opening of the southernmost tunnel. The trestle that goes across the river now, between the campgrounds and the dam, was built as part of that project, said Bass. That trestle was built because they bypassed those old tunnels. So where exactly that is, I'll have to double check the map again, but where have we seen campgrounds and down by the river? I don't know. Could be a whole different thing. I could be completely wrong. I could be talking complete nonsense. Who knows? You gotta do your own research and draw your own conclusions, of course. But the tunnel that was abandoned is visible from the highway, although it isn't accessible to vehicles, and Bass warns that it is off limits to the public. It's kind of dangerous, he said. We don't really want people climbing around in it. The ceiling has fallen in, and it's not very stable rock. Even if someone attempted to explore the tunnel, they wouldn't get far, as it is caved on itself only a few feet in. Okay, fair, but that doesn't mean that the rest of it's not being used. And why would they be discouraging urban explorers? You know, for sure, the safety aspect of it all, but definitely some compelling information to consider. That is for damn sure. Looking even further, there were also different mining tunnels, historic gold mining tunnel to be open to the public. So who knows how many different old mine shafts and tunnels there were in and around this area in the past that may have been repurposed in modern days. This one is now being open to the public. 300-foot mining tunnel in central Wyoming that was abandoned soon after its construction in 1868 is being open to the public. Casper Star Tribune reports that the horizontal tunnel carved into the rock on a hillside at South Pass City State Historic Site will be open for tours September 1st. And this was back in 2018. Superintendent Joe Ellis says the tunnel was constructed largely by hand, with workers using picks, shovels, and gunpowder to excavate about 3 feet of the tunnel a day. It was abandoned when no gold was found and left undisturbed for 150 years. So how many other tunnels just like that exist? Who knows? We know that with some of these ghost towns all across North America, there were old mining towns, oil fields, different places that were built and set up for some sort of industry at the time, but then later, those different operations were shut down and it either became a ghost town or they were repurposed for something else or they were filled in or what have you. So definitely tunnels exist. Can we at least all agree on that tunnels do exist, and whether they're being used for good or evil, that is the question. Whether they've been restored or expanded or filled in or blocked off, again, that's the question. But if it was, if there was this elaborate system used once upon a time for smuggling, illegal substances or beverages, what would they be using them for now? What is still illegal that tunnels are already, that we know are being used? We know that drug transportation happens, and we know that tunnels come into play in some of those operations. So what else could they possibly be used for? So again, not suggesting that there is, or confirming that there's any truth to what has been alleged in this case file. But there's definitely some common denominators of truth here that we can agree is a reality, that historically speaking, there are tunnel systems. We know that exists. We know that Prohibition era houses that were built during a certain time were built into that. They were built in to be able to connect to these different systems, tunnel systems, or had secret passageways in different basement areas that, were covert so that they could store illegal liquor or to be able to enjoy illegal liquor, that, and it being soundproofed and away from prying eyes. That's for a lot of these mansions now that are being sold in different metropolitan areas. It's like a selling feature to have secret passageways or secret tunnel systems. Some of them just have a tunnel just from the main home down to like the pool area or whatever. But we know that all exists. We know that it's possible. We know that it's a thing. So we definitely need to take that into consideration when we're reviewing these sorts of cases and these sorts of situations. Because there's no way that millions of children can just be going missing every single year and vanishing into thin air, completely just disappearing off the face of the planet when we live in such a modernized surveillance society. We've got pretty much everybody's got cameras nowadays, whether it's on their doorbell or just in and around businesses up and down the streets, traffic cams. It's like mass surveillance everywhere. So how are kids still just disappearing into thin air? It just doesn't make sense. Unless, All right, we're going to leave it at that. Big thank you to everyone that bared down and stuck it out for the whole video. You are all true soul warriors. It takes a lot of bravery and inner strength to be able to digest and absorb something this dark, but it must be done. It's already been a really trying and difficult case to work through and to be able to present and describe in such a way that's within the guidelines and that's also not traumatizing you guys. It was pretty traumatizing for me to kind of to go through it and have to sift through and be able to censor it and present it in such a way. I will admit, haven't really eaten properly or slept properly in days. So, I mean, I do apologize for any of that that's now kind of affecting you even though I have censored it to an extent. But this is that gritty, hard, dark corners that, that need to have light shed on them. And whether there's, any truth of the matter in this specific case or not, it definitely highlights some things that do need to be considered. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you know of any other info or history to do with Casper, Wyoming, and or the surrounding area that you think may be relevant to this case, or other similar cases, let us know. I had found some more info about abandoned buildings and some urban legends involving paranormal activity and strange occurrences in and around the mountain range areas and sprinkled around town. So there's definitely more to all of this if we wanted to dig deeper. Perhaps I'll do a live stream follow-up in which we can discuss at further length together. So also let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. For more updates and resources, you can join the Eyes Wide Open Telegram group. For uncensored and bonus content, you can join us over on Patreon. Nearly all content is free to all members, but paid members will have early access to some posts, as well as additional features and benefits. You can also find me on Twitter, where I mainly just repost news and info relating to the great big elephant in the room, but I am trying to get into the habit of posting and interacting more over there. Links to everything, as always, are in the description. Lastly, but certainly not least, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the flip side.